He had conquered pain before. He had outridden fate before. But this time, the warning didn't come from a rival, a red flag, or a wild slide through gravel. It came from a doctor. Under the glare of fluorescent lights, the man who once tamed 300 horsepower with a flick of the wrist now faced an adversary no throttle could overcome, his own anatomy. If he rides again too soon, Dr. Ángel Chart whispered with the calm of a man who's seen too many legends limp away from greatness, he might lose more than a race. He might lose everything. The words detonated across the paddock like the echo of a crash no camera caught. Marc Marquez, the gladiator of lean angles, the artist of chaos, the man whose front tire danced on the knife's edge between triumph and catastrophe, was suddenly human again. Beneath the titanium and scars, beneath the roar of the desmosetici, there was fragility. The coracoid bone, an obscure piece of the shoulder few ever mention, had become the axis of his destiny. It is no larger than a knuckle, yet it anchors the entire mechanical orchestra of motion, the lever of control, the conductor of precision, the silent guardian of balance at 62 degrees of lean and 2.1 gs of force. And now it was cracked. Inside the sterile walls of Madrid's Clinica Ruba International, time slowed to a mechanical heartbeat. Beep, pause, beep. Each sound was a countdown not to a race start, but to an uncertain tomorrow. The champion who once measured life in laps now measured it in millimeters of bone healing, in degrees of rotation, in patience forced upon him like a cruel penalty. How long can I stay still before I stop being me? He wondered, staring at a shoulder that refused to obey. Cameras waited for quotes. Fans demanded optimism, but the truth was too raw to broadcast. MotoGP's doctors spoke of ligaments, stability, and microtorsion, but between their lines lay poetry written in pain. Chart's tone carried both science and sorrow, describing forces that no human frame should endure. When Marquez leans into a turn, his shoulder absorbs more than weight. It absorbs destiny itself. The human body, he explained, was never built for the punishment that modern MotoGP inflicts. The limits have shifted from technology to biology. The Ducati roars louder, leans deeper, brakes harder, and the price is extracted from muscle, from nerve, from willpower stretched past reason. And so the paddock holds its breath. The red number 93 sits silent, his machine polished but unmoved, a monument to unfinished speed. Reporters speak of recovery timelines, but what's at stake is something far greater, the fragile balance between obsession and survival. Because this isn't just another injury. It's a question whispered beneath every helmet. When the body says stop, can the heart still race? The doctor's warning wasn't just medical, it was prophetic. For the first time, Marc Marquez is not fighting for a victory, but for the right to continue riding his legend. And somewhere between titanium screws and unspoken fears, the greatest rider of his generation is learning that the most dangerous circuit of all lies within himself. Under the merciless sun of Mandalika, victory still echoed in Marc Marquez's mind like the fading roar of an engine cooling after battle. He had just conquered Japan, that rare moment when precision, instinct, and sheer defiance align. Yet destiny had other gears in mind. The first lap of Indonesia felt routine, the Ducati humming like a predator in rhythm, until chaos struck with surgical cruelty. Bezecchi's rear tire clipped him at full lean, and in an instant, Marquez became a passenger of gravity. The gravel tore across his visor, pebbles ricocheting against his helmet like furious applause. Not again, not the right shoulder, he thought, as his body twisted, memory colliding with pain. When he finally stopped sliding, the silence was immense, broken only by the distant whine of bikes disappearing into the next corner. A marshal's hand reached for him. He waved it off, jaw tight, eyes dark with disbelief. The ligament in his right shoulder had cracked, a small structure, yes, but essential, linking the coracoid process to the mechanical orchestra of tendons that steer every millimeter of throttle and lean. It was as if the very hinge of his identity had snapped. The paddock murmured, Marquez down again. The medical team rushed in, gloves trembling with the knowledge of history repeating itself. It's not just pain, one whispered later, it's memory embedded in muscle. His shoulder, already scarred from 4 surgeries, protested like metal fatigue under too much strain. In the quiet of the clinic tent, he stared at his arm, swollen, immobile, almost foreign. I felt invincible a week ago, he muttered, his voice hoarse. Now I can't even lift my visor. Outside, the Indonesian crowd kept cheering, unaware that they were witnessing the beginning of another chapter in an endless loop of endurance and fragility. The medical monitor beeped like a mocking metronome, counting seconds that felt like years. For Marquez, That day was not merely a crash, it was a confrontation with the edge of his own myth. In that instant, the hero of Japan became a man staring at the limits of anatomy and fate. Like a comet burning too bright, he had touched the edge of brilliance and broken upon it. At first, optimism filled the Ducati garage like the scent of burnt rubber after a podium celebration. The medical reports spoke of rest, immobilization, and patience, a rare word in Marquez's dictionary. The plan was simple. No surgery, no risk, just time. But time for a rider like him is a double-edged throttle. Each day away from the track felt like a theft, each quiet morning like an accusation. If I stop too long, I disappear, he confessed privately, staring at the stillness of his arms suspended in a sling. Doctors prescribed ultrasound therapy and isometric exercises to preserve muscle tone, but by the seventh day, swelling lingered like a ghost refusing to leave. A subtle grinding sound during movement betrayed what the scans soon confirmed. The coracoid fracture wasn't stabilizing. Beneath the skin, the acromioclavicular ligament, that crucial bridge between bone and precision, sagged under its own despair. "We can't wait any longer," the surgeon said, the words cutting sharper than any scalpel. In Madrid's Clinica Ruba, the air smelled of antiseptic and fate. The operation lasted 3 hours, titanium screws whispering into bone with mathematical exactness. A small device, rarely mentioned outside medical journals, monitored ligament tension in real time, the kind of innovation used only on athletes whose bodies are worth millions. Marquez drifted in anesthesia's fog, his mind replaying races instead of dreams. He saw corners, felt acceleration, then silence. The surgery was declared successful, but success is an ambiguous word in MotoGP. It means survival, not victory. When he awoke, pain greeted him like an old companion, familiar and cruel. "It's done," the doctor said softly, "but recovery will test you more than racing ever did." He nodded, eyes distant, seeing not the hospital ceiling but a racetrack receding into the horizon. The road ahead was long, uncertain, and brutally slow. In that sterile room, Marc Marquez realized that sometimes the most dangerous laps are the ones you ride standing still. The announcement came like a cold front over the paddock, precise, official, and devastating. On October 23rd, Ducati's press release landed in every journalist's inbox at once, each sentence a calculated incision into the hopes of fans worldwide. Marc Marquez would not race again in 2025. The phrasing was sterile, but between the lines, grief breathed quietly. He watched the news unfold from his home in Cervera, the glow of the television reflecting off his immobilized shoulder. "So that's it, another season gone," he whispered to himself, voice low, resigned, like a man reading the obituary of his own prime. The recovery timeline had stretched cruelly, longer than any high-speed straight. His physical therapist explained that the coracoid bone, though small, demands perfect integration. It carries subtle torque every time the arm stabilizes under braking, a force that can exceed 60 kilograms in MotoGP conditions. A single premature twist could undo months of healing. Dr. Ángel Chart confirmed it with surgical clarity. He must not return before he is 100%, or he risks everything. The quote echoed across the media, repeated, dissected, feared. For Marquez, it wasn't just a medical warning. It was an existential verdict. The world that had once measured his life in milliseconds now measured it in millimeters of bone density. Days blurred into physiotherapy sessions, the rhythm of recovery replacing the rhythm of racing. He felt like a pilot grounded by invisible weather, his cockpit replaced by a hospital bed. Outside, engines roared on without him, the cruel reminder that MotoGP waits for no one. Yet beneath the frustration, a fragile calm emerged, a sense that maybe his fiercest race was the one against his own impatience. "Let the body regenerate," Chart had said. And for the first time, Marquez understood that healing could be an act of courage. His season ended not with a crash or a checkered flag, but with silence, the kind that teaches you who you are when the noise fades. Dr. Ángel Chart's words sliced through the optimism like the edge of a scalpel, sterile yet merciless. The MotoGP medical director spoke with the weight of experience, a man who had seen champions reduced to shadows of themselves by the arrogance of haste. "This is a serious injury. His arm is badly damaged after 4 operations. He must return only when he is 100%. Returning early would mean risking his career." The quote became a mantra and a warning, echoing across paddocks and headlines. For Marquez, those words landed heavier than any fall. How do you stop when your soul only knows acceleration? He asked himself during one sleepless night, staring at the ceiling where shadows danced like ghosts of old races. Chart wasn't exaggerating. Each of the 4 previous surgeries had left microscar tissue along the humerus, altering the arm's rotational axis by fractions of a degree, an almost invisible distortion that could, under 300 kilometers per hour of g-force, become catastrophic. The coracoid bone, though small, acts as an anchor point for the deltoid and biceps. Its stability defines control in every corner entry. In a sport where balance is poetry written in motion, one misaligned fiber is enough to turn elegance into disaster. Chart's tone was firm but human, more father than physician. He admired Marquez's resilience but feared his stubbornness even more. He is extraordinary mentally, he later said, but sometimes courage can disguise denial. Outside the hospital, reporters waited, microphones eager, eyes hungry for a sign of defiance. Marquez smiled faintly, but said nothing. Inside, the truth was raw. The champion who once defied physics now battled biology. Each flex of his hand was a question, each twinge an omen. The medical report read like a technical document, but between its sterile lines pulsed a single, terrible reality, that every repair leaves a mark, and even titanium has limits. The climax came when Chart added softly, if he rides before time, he won't just lose races, he might lose the arm that built his legend. And in that moment, silence roared louder than any engine on Earth. Under the fluorescent lights of the rehabilitation center, the reality of anatomy became the true antagonist in Marc Marquez's story. The coracoid bone, no larger than a bent finger, held the delicate equilibrium between strength and control, the fulcrum upon which every lean, every correction, every ounce of his genius depended. Dr. Chart explained with calm precision that this tiny structure bears the rotational stress of the scapula, transmitting energy through the clavicle like an electrical circuit balancing voltage under pressure. If that current is disrupted, he warned, the entire system can short out. So it's the small piece that decides the whole machine. Marquez mused inwardly, the thought as humbling as it was cruel. In the physiotherapy mirror, he watched his reflection struggle to lift a single kilogram, the same arm that once tamed a 260 horsepower monster. Each motion was measured in millimeters, monitored by sensors mapping muscular fatigue in real time, a technology so advanced that even a twitch of 0.3 seconds was logged as significant. Pain arrived in waves, rhythmic and absolute. The medical team spoke in data. He listened in silence. One misstep could mean ligament rupture, dislocation, or permanent instability, a nightmare that lurked behind every cautious repetition. Chart reminded him that under MotoGP braking, forces can exceed 2 gs, twisting the shoulder into a mechanical crucible where human tissue competes with physics. The metaphor came to Marquez naturally. His body felt like a suspension spring wound too tight, its tension holding both brilliance and collapse. Outside, engines tested for Valencia, their sound bleeding faintly through the window, a symphony he could not join. It's strange, he whispered, how silence can hurt more than impact. The technicians noted his progress, the graphs rising slowly like dawn after a long storm. Chart watched from the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He knew this stage was where champions either matured or broke. When the session ended, Marquez sat motionless, sweat dripping like truth from his forehead, realizing that recovery was not about power but precision. The climax arrived in that fragile awareness. Greatness, he thought, is not measured by how fast you fall, but by how carefully you rebuild what's broken. The paddock had become a silent war of resilience, 3 names echoing through it like verses of the same lament: Marquez, Martin, Vinales. Each bore the same mark of modern MotoGP, speed that outpaces the body's evolution. Dr. Ángel Chart, always more philosopher than physician, saw the pattern no telemetry could hide. We are reaching the limit of human endurance, he said gravely. Machines evolve faster than muscles. The numbers supported him. Lateral G-forces now exceed those of early F1 cars, with lean angles surpassing 65 degrees, compressing shoulders under loads no joint was designed to endure. We're not machines, Marquez thought, watching practice sessions he could no longer join, the smell of fuel and rain mixing in a bitter nostalgia. Jorge Martin's scans revealed partial deltoid tearing. Vinales' surgery scar ran like a lightning trace across his collarbone, symbols of a sport devouring its bravest. The engineers chase milliseconds, yet every gain demands a sacrifice measured in ligaments, tendons, and titanium screws. Chart's warning transcended medical jargon. It was a manifesto for survival. He praised Marquez for choosing rest, calling it the most difficult victory a rider can earn. The metaphor became clear. MotoGP was a wild river, majestic, merciless, and impossible to tame without losing something along the way. Journalists turned the quote into headlines, but in the rider's eyes there was a deeper reflection, one born from pain and respect. Maybe slowing down is the new act of courage, Chart added, his tone a mix of resignation and hope. Inside the Ducati garage, Marquez listened, nodding slowly, knowing that wisdom often comes when applause fades. The sport had to adapt or break. Safety technology could shield, but it could not rewrite human biology. The lesson hung heavy in the humid air of Valencia, invisible yet undeniable. And as twilight fell over the circuit, the message settled like dust after a race's end. Even legends must learn when to stop, because sometimes survival is the most heroic finish line of all.